Coming up, the New Jersey Devils cap off the West Coast trip on a losing note. But do we feel confident overall in this team as they head back home? We dive in on the takeaways, especially between the pipes, coming up next. Yes, sir. It's CPL, the Devil's Puck Luck podcast, where we are your host. Over here, Adam Armbrecht. Over there, Danny McDonough. And it is, as we said at the top, Danny, a bit of a melancholy note. The West Coast trip ends 4-1 at the hands of the Edmonton Oilers. Let's start there before we expand to the coast trip overall. How did you feel about this one on a back-to-back?
I think this one was kind of written all over, what was going to happen with the Oilers being the hottest team in the league right now, winning their
whatever.
Yeah, listen, it's such a monumental task coming off a back-to-back, and we lead the league in 16 back-to-backs this year. And going out west and playing the type of teams that we played going in to play Edmonton, man, it's a tall task. And I'm not look, I'll be honest with you, I'm not like, oh my God, we played terrible. We had some really good moments where we played really well, especially defensively. So, I really go out of this game and one empty net goal, obviously, too, when they lost.
Yeah, it's a 3-1 game.
I come out of it and I'm okay. 3-1 road trip, but obviously, you want to make it 4-0, obviously, but I don't think either of us expected a over 500 road trip before going out west. So taking this 3-1, road trip out west and losing to the Oilers sucks, but listen, we move on and we're coming home.
It's a classic, like you're 3-0 on the West Coast trip, so then you get greedy and you want to be 4-0, even though going 500, as you say, being 2-2 would be perfectly acceptable. I'll just say inside of this one game here against the Oilers, I understand it's the back-to-back, and I think I saw a lot of fans saying, you can see the tired legs there for the Devils. Like, I disregard that completely. They were playing a really strong game. Special teams let them down in this one, right? I mean, you can't go on the power play as often as the Devils did, where they're incredibly successful and not convert. You also can't take a handful of penalties and then kind of fall down there a little bit. Now, as you get into the third period, maybe it doesn't quite get across the line, but I actually think there was a couple of like really unlucky sequences over the course of this one where you could have been sitting here saying that this was a 2-2 game in the third period, potentially. One thing of note was that the Devils had more shots on goal in the third period than they did in the first two periods combined. I think the willingness to pull the trigger was a little bit, trying to find the sweet spot. And maybe that is the last game of the road trip on the back-to-back. Maybe you're thinking, we're not going to have perfect chances, so let's try to really manufacture that ideal chance. And then you don't take more chances that you should be, right? So ultimately, they lose this game. I thought Jesper Bratt, by the way, played incredibly well in this game and didn't maybe get rewarded as much as you'd want him to for how he looked. But you also mentioned the defense, and I think that's probably a good spot to start here when we talk about themes overall from this road trip. The defense continues to be rounding itself into form. I have a young player that probably deserves a little bit of note here, but how have you felt about the bottom six looking on that side of the puck?
Yeah, the last three games, we've been a very different team. You go back to the Canucks game, the first game, where it was 6-5, and you're just like, wow, we got some issues here, with our defense still, and it's going to continue. But then you go into the next game against the Kraken, and it was a completely different situation. We were playing responsible, which is what we want to see. And it seems like we just turned it on. I love Shimon Nemitz. I think he is absolutely incredible.
Which, by the way, just like quick pause, Amanda Stein posted this the other day, asking him how to pronounce his name. He was like, whatever you want to call me. She's like, no, it's your name. It kind of matters. Shimon, got to put that little shut at the front end of it, right?
Yeah. And listen, you see him being rounded out with Siegenthaler. And I think Siegenthaler has played a lot better, too, with him as well. So, this might have sparked Siegs, which he needed, because Siegenthaler was one of those guys on the defensive core that was really struggling. And, now with Dougie Hamilton out, even though we know he's not a defenseman first,
sure,
you need to really crack it down, with Siegenthaler and Marino being your guys that are going to be those shutdown guys when it comes to defense, especially late in the games. So, for me, Nemitz has just been a breath of fresh air, and this kid is going to be a phenomenal two-way player. And listen, he makes mistakes, but it doesn't seem to faze him. I feel like that he's made a couple mistakes here and there. Over the West Coast trip, there was a mistake that led to a goal, but he shook it off, and he had a phenomenal game after that. And I think that's what you're looking for, especially in a 19-year-old kid. This kid is 19, Adam. I think we forget that 19-year-old Luke Hughes at 20. Sure. It's really incredible to see two rookies stepping in the way they are And the Devils doing what they're doing on that road trip. Going 3-1 out west with 2 rookies on defense is incredible.
Does he stay up? Does he stay up when Dougie comes back?
He's here for the rest of the year.
Yep.
He's here I think that if the Devils make a trade, say they go out and they get Tanev, I think that you're going to see Colin Miller scratch for Tanev. And Colin Miller's played great too. So it's difficult, right? When you have a situation where you need that big guy, that big body defenseman that's going to throw his body around, and be a shutdown guy with Seagenthal or Marino. Colin Miller's played great, but Tanev's a lot better of a player. So I think that'd be the option if you did make a trade. But right now, listen, if the Devils can continue to play the defense that they're playing, especially when they come home, we're going to have a lot of home games coming up. If we can really sustain the type of defense we're playing, where we're not giving up odd man rushes, where we're really playing strong behind our net, where you see the defenseman pinching in the right moments and not giving up the blue line, maybe we won't make a trade, especially if the goaltending continues to do well. I still do think that we're going to wind up getting a goalie, but maybe the defense holds pat. If the deal is not there to be made from Fitz, let's just not give up draft picks or give up, those young guys when there's not something there we need to do when it comes to defense. I think that you and I both saw the regression of the defense as a whole.
Yeah.
And maybe we're getting to the point where, listen, maybe this West Coast trip is what we needed, to get out here, get away from home, travel with the team, and turn that coin, flip that coin over. And maybe we hit rock bottom, 5 games ago, and we're slowly going to turn the page. I mean, that's the hope. Obviously it's still very young in the season. We're getting to about a third of the season. So, I think these next home games, right before Christmas is really going to be a big tell for what we need to do moving forward in 2024 calendar year.
Let's talk about in between the pipes here in a second. Let's talk about Alexander Holtz. Gosh, I mean, dude, sometimes I get exhausted being so right. We'll dive into that side of it. And also what we think this team needs to do, or maybe I'll ask Danny, is there some world where there was a little bit of an overreaction by the fan base in a very specific area of this team? We'll dive into that in just one second. But the first thing we're going to do, guys, is tell you about our good friends over at DraftKings Sportsbook. Oh, you know that you can download the app right now and use promo code
THPN.
That's right. To bet on all the action on the ice with DraftKings Sportsbook, new customers get $150 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on hockey. That's promo code
THPN.
Only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. And by the way, if you're over there and you're talking about the NHL and the Devils are already done playing and you're looking down this thing, man, right now, if you were a betting man there, Danny, would you take the money line for the Kings to come back as we actively record this against the New York Rangers down 2-0?
They're down 2-0?
Yeah.
The Kings are down 2-0?
Yeah.
No, I'm not taking that. Because Jonathan Quick has played absolutely incredible. He's playing his old team. He's a man on a mission. I'm not taking that.
I think it's smart because when you throw these out at Danny, I didn't tell him it's already in the third period. There's only 14 minutes left. You're down 2-0. There's not necessarily a great chance there, but you can get in on all those types of specials and so much more over on DraftKings.com. That's because you know that the crown is yours. Now, these bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. And if you have a gambling problem, you can call 1-800-GAMBLER at www.100gambler.net. In New York, you can call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hills Casino Resort. 21 age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario, Canada. Our friends to the north. See dkng.com/hockey for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gambling resources. NHL and the NHL Shield are registered trademarks of the National Hockey League. Copyright NHL 2023. All rights, they are reserved. Now, the question that I wanted to get to here, but first, let's stay positive for another moment longer. Alexander Holtz is really good. I said that he could be a key to this season, and darn it, I keep getting proved right on this. We said, now, and I'm not knocking you. I said 20 goals, that's the standard. You said 15 to 20 is totally reasonable and exciting. We're now living in a world where 25 maybe gets put on the table coming out of this road trip, just coming out of the recent success. And now you're seeing whether or not we entirely agreed with the way Lindy Ruff was handling it. At the end of the day, Lindy Ruff shuffled him up and down and over and left and right. And now he just seems to be inching his way up the pecking order. And with some of these injuries, he's actually become more crucial over this recent stretch as well.
You know what's crazy? I know I'm thinking far ahead right now
Do
because
it.
obviously Toffoli and Mercer, they're coming off. They're going to need contracts at the end of the year. This is a huge testament to what we have with Holtz if he's going to be able to step in for one of those guys, and we're not going to sign one. I don't think we're going to sign both players. I think you know that, especially even though the cap is increasing. I think we're going to have to most likely let Toffoli walk because he's going to want a lot of money, especially for what he's doing this year. But it,
I
it
think
makes
some fans might tell you that Dawson Mercer hasn't played up up to par here, and it hurts because he's an in-house guy. But then you look at him and say, is he going to be worth whatever that contract could be? Right?
and again, Dawson Mercer is more of a two-way player in the sense he's going to hit the button.
Oh,
He's
hit that
going to
up.
be playing the penalty kill.
Yeah.
He's going to have that defensive structure where he's going to be reliable, can play center and can play wing.
And
So
younger and long term, right? And by the way, he's not going to command the same contract that Toffoli's going to command as
no,
well
not
from a
at all,
numbers.
not at all. And but you feel more comfortable knowing that you have this kid Holtz that is now playing to what we thought he could be. And
Yeah.
I think that the ceiling is still higher. I think that this kid can become a player where he can score 30 goals a year. I really do. I think that once he starts learning his two-way game, he's going to be able to be an even better player. And listen, a lot of people don't like the way that Ruff handled Holtz.
Yeah.
And I understand. I completely understand. I do. I think Ruff is doing things behind closed doors to motivate this kid, to help teach this kid. And he's continued to say that he's had conversations over and over, game in and game out, to really help define who he is as a player and to help teach him from his mistakes. We know that he's had issues with defense. And the reason why he was put on the fourth line, at a moment, the end of the West Coast trip was because he had bad defensive play in some points in the last couple games.
Right.
He then was elevated to the third line, played a lot better. And tonight against the Oilers, you saw he was playing with Jack and Toffoli because he is a playmaker and he's developing and he's growing and he's learning the type of game that he needs to have to find the open ice. So Holtz, he's a great player. I'm so happy that he's doing what he's doing. We talked preseason that, this was his year to prove that he can be a staple in the Devils lineup. And he's doing that, especially with the injuries. He's carrying a lot. And to have 8 goals right now is great for the kid, and I think that he could have 25 to 30 goals. It's definitely a possibility.
The interesting thing for me is this is what I find fascinating. I think now at this point of the season, moving him around a little bit and driving home a point, especially about defensive responsibilities, that part of it makes sense. I still fundamentally disagree with the way Ruff treated preseason and training camp versus the start of the season, but I still stand by. If you're a fan that didn't like, and this is one thing you should always be, as I think that Danny and I both are, and hopefully we do acknowledge this throughout the show, like throughout the course of the podcast. If we're wrong about something, if we didn't get it right, you say it just because you want to be informed by the sample size. If you're a fan and you didn't believe in Alexander Holtz, you need to allow this season to be changing your mind. If you were not a fan of Lindy Ruff, last season should have taken care of that for you, or the start of this year should still be taking care of that for you. Far too many narratives from the fan base are, I didn't like Lindy Ruff at the start of last year, so now if something goes wrong at the start of this year, it's on him or Alexander Holtz. Like, at some point, you need to move off of those things. Not that either player or coach is perfect, but that it is no longer the narrative that you believed in 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago. Now, this brings me to my next question. Do you believe, because when you go back and look at the schedule now, the Devils really have this one brutal stretch of games, effectively, where you look at the schedule and you say, starting on November 7th through November 24th, they lost 6 out of 7 games, right? Absolutely brutal. And they dealt with injuries throughout the course of it. Outside of that, they've been a fairly winning hockey team, right? Is there any world where you think that the goaltending struggles right now don't necessarily need to be defining for the entire year? Because I feel like we said about the defense, it's just not good enough. It's going to be the Achilles heel. Like, start of the year, the defense was the Achilles heel of this team. No doubt about it for the first handful of games. Now it is the goaltending. At least with Vitek, you feel like there is a sample size that says he has been a pretty good goaltender. We think Akira can get better. But as the fan base right now, and we've done it too, just harping on this specific area at the moment because it's been bad. Like, it's been bad, and that's okay to say it, but it can get better, no?
You know what it is? It's I kind of look at it in 2 ways. I look at it because now that Akira and Vitek are making some really good saves,
Right.
it makes me think it was more the goaltending than the defense even earlier in the season. And the reason being, obviously there was terrible games where we had horrendous odd man rushes, for our opposition that we just played bad defensively. I don't want to Let me preface it by saying that. But I think that we were overreacting a little bit to how bad certain individual players were playing defensively. And I think we knew that just from their careers that they were going to step it up and they were going to turn the page and they were going to continue to get better. Marino being one. Marino had a really bad, like 8 to 10 games in the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
Siegenthaler has had a bad 15 to 20 games and he's slowly turning it on. I think Ball has progressed really well over the season. I think he's closing out players very well. Luke Hughes, again, making a lot of mistakes,
Yep.
but he's cut them down. You see he's growing. So I think a lot of it is we hyper focused on the defense because our goaltending was not making a save. We weren't getting bailed out ever, like ever. Now that we're slowly getting bailed out by the goaltending, some of the defensive mistakes you don't talk about as much, and to Lindy Ruff's credit, he says that, we're not making a save sometimes. We're just not making a save. And you see the good things that the defense does, but when you see the bad things and it leads to a goal because of slip-shotty goaltending, you're going to talk about it. So I think now I'm at the point where I can put the defense aside for a little bit because obviously we want to see the consistency continue to grow over the next 2, 3, 4 weeks, obviously. I still think there's an issue with goaltending. I love that the goaltending I love that the goaltending 100%. Is playing well. I love that Vitek and Akira had some good games. I still think Vitek gave up some bad rebounds. I think he was in bad positions.
Yep.
It's neither here nor there. I think Akira is playing better than Vitek right now. And I still do believe he should get the majority of the starts the rest of this 2023 calendar. I really do.
I think the time to flip that script is probably okay to say it's time to do that and hope that VTech can actually become like an elite level quote backup goaltender as opposed to a average to sometimes below average starting goaltender, right?
I don't want to go. So I don't know about you. I don't want to go get Gibson because Gibson, like he's having a good year. But what his career numbers are, it's close to what Akira's are this season, So I'm not willing to make a big trade to give up a lot of assets to go get Gibson.
Sure.
Maybe Ingram's different because Ingram's having a phenomenal year, obviously, with the Coyotes. But it's tough for me because there's not a lot of options when it comes to goaltending. So are we just going to be like, all right, whatever, there's not enough options, so we're not going to do anything. And we have a great offensive team. Defense is playing okay to well, but our goaltending continues to struggle and we kind of just say it's what it is? Or do we force that trade? And then you talk about
what's the cost?
The Mercer,
right.
The Mercers of the world, the assets, the draft picks, the Seamus Casey's of the world. So, you and I are more of the young player mentality and homegrown players that we want to continue to have in our system. We don't want to just be like, you know what, we're going to go get Gibson for a year and we'll see what happens, but we're going to give up Seamus Casey. You and I are probably going to say no to that, especially if Akira and VTech continue to play, where they're, 900 goals against average or 910, and they slowly get a little bit better. And we can be like, all right, goals against average are in the low 2s to mid 2s. So we're okay. But the question is, and I'll pose it to you, do you see it happening? Do you see VTech and Akira turning it around, not to be great goaltenders,
right,
but to be competent goaltenders and to be comfortable coming down the stretch of the 2023-24 season and making a push to the playoffs to get position, obviously, going into the playoffs? Are you comfortable, or do you think right now that no matter what, we need to change?
Yeah, and it's funny too, man, because you go and you look at it, they're going to have, 4, 5, 6 out of their next 7 are going to be at home. And the only away game in there is the Blue Jackets mixed in. Now they'll see Edmonton again on December 21st, back at the Prudential Center. So like you're going to have this kind of running games where you can make the case based on the schedule. Hey, there's goaltender wins out there on this schedule over these next handful of games. I think yes, I guess that's kind of my point. I think that the goaltending can regress back to their averages. Now, Akira is a little bit more of a mystery, but we got kind of the flash in the playoffs. I think VTech is going to settle back into what his career numbers are. And his career numbers are pretty solid. The difference for me is going to be, and I think you framed it the right way, it would take the goaltending continuing to fall off a cliff like VTech did for a stretch of really bad games. If that was the case, then I think Fitz is inspired to say, well, it's not just about right now in this season. It's about in totality. Where are we going from here in that position? Then maybe you're willing to sacrifice certain players you normally wouldn't. But if it's just about this year and you think the goaltending is pretty solid, this is where it goes back to that high level view of, again, we overachieved last season. It doesn't mean we don't have high expectations, but I keep wondering about whether or not you and I in this, got a little bit overhyped, a little bit overexcited, And we're seeing now, even the players that we're excited about in Alexander Holtz and in Nemitz, like these guys are great. And Luke, all these guys are great, but they're all so young. And even Dawson Mercer and even Ball. Like I was very critical of Ball early in the year. And you kept reminding me, like, remember his age here. Like we're treating him like he's a decade-old veteran because he's been with this team and because he's meant a lot to this team and because he's been good. But that, I think, is what I keep coming back to. When you look at this roster and you think about, hey, who are the most important players? Who are the most talented players? Who are the best players? You go, yep, all 24, maybe 23 and under. And that's really hard to put this level of expectation on. So that's where I think the organization is saying, hey, let's keep looking solid here. Let's keep winning games. By the way, 2 spots up ahead of them in the standings are the Islanders. The Devils have 2 more wins than them.
Yeah.
Some of this is just about getting across the line in the third period and getting to some overtime games and seeing what happens, right? So that's, I maybe am recalibrating my expectations a little bit right now, and I'll go one step further on it. I think that while these check-in points, and I am a big proponent of checking in at the quarter mark, the half mark, but I don't think that we truly are going to know what our expectations should be for this team from a playoff perspective until we're 55, 60 games through this year. Because that's when the stride happens. That's when the push happens. And everything from now until then, it may just be like you mentioned about Lindy with Alexander Holtz. It may be effing with some guys a little bit. It may be some tough love and lessons, right? Because our ultimate goal is this thing. And everything I do up until that point needs to be figuring out what works, what doesn't work, what are the pieces. And guess what? We're going to be here 10 games from now. Dan's going to be frustrated. I'm going to be frustrated because it doesn't matter because there's all these games in between.
Yeah.
But I think I'm pretty committed to the idea that that's what this is about, that's what the first 40, 50 games are about for this team. And that's really hard to deal with on a night in, night out basis with some of these rough performances, including from the goaltending, especially of late.
It's tough, right? Because I think no matter what happens when it comes to if we add another defender or if we add another goalie, I think the fans are still going to obviously scrutinize it, because it's a very tough situation. Like we could very well add another defender like Tanev and not add another goalie,
Sure.
or we could add another goalie and not add another defender. So,
and that's still a debatable topic, right? Getting stronger defensively to help what the goaltending currently is, which is probably an easier thing to add than the sacrifice of getting that goaltender, right?
And I trust Fitz, and I think you do too. Fitz is a great general manager. I don't think that he is willing to undress our farm system. So,
hey Dan, what? Generally, he's a pretty good manager.
Oh, I like that.
You get that?
Generally, he's a pretty good general manager. You see what I did there?
No, but continue.
Wait, what did I say? General manager?
You're okay.
General manager. He's listen. We trust him. So, and I don't think he's going to break apart a young core, even in the AHL or even younger, with draft picks, to get someone that is a year rental. I don't see him doing it. I really don't. So, will I be annoyed if we stand pat? No, not if we continue to play the way we've been playing the last 4 games,
Right.
3 games, I should say, because the Canucks one defensively was not good. If we continue to play the way we've been playing the last 3 games, and again, that's a huge question mark. I know it's only 3 games, but I'd be fine with it. Like you said, you're looking at the totality of what we can do in the next 5 to 10 years, not what we can do in the next 60 games, and that's where it becomes difficult because you don't want to get fleeced on a trade. You don't want to get fleeced to ruin those 5 to 10 years potentially to be that type of team, to be that dominating team that can compete for multiple Stanley Cups, not just one Stanley Cup. So listen, there's a lot of question marks right now, but the great thing is that we've had a good, solid 3 games defensively. And I'm including this game against the Oilers. I don't think we played poorly. I think that we had some bad puck luck, which is going to happen. And again, you talked about it. Special teams was not good. And you got to stay disciplined against a team that won their 7th straight. A team that had 2 wins. I think they were 2-12 at some point, and now they won 7 in a row and are already back in the discussion of being a cup contender, still below 500. That's how good they look. So hockey's a funny sport. Hockey's a sport. We can lose 6 out of 7, be injured, and we can rattle off a 3-1 West Coast trip and where we look like a different team. So we're going to have these up and down conversations. I think you and I know it. It's just going to happen over the course of a season. That's what makes it fun because there's going to be a lot of question marks, but seeing the growth and the development of this team has been special, from the young kids' perspective. And seeing the regression, you question certain players. And I think it's going to continue. But for me, because I know you got to get into the next, our next sponsor here, but Teemo's the big issue for me right now, because if he's not injured, he's taking a step back. I think he doesn't look the way he normally would look, and that is my biggest concern for me in the next 5 to 6 games. I really want to see Teemu take another step here to become the player I think that we know he will be, and I think he'll be fine. But he is a bit of a concern to me right now.
Let's close out on that topic here because we say trusting Fitz, and we both do. But there's something to the idea that you went and got Teemu last season. He helped push this team. He was a great presence against the Rangers, that physicality. There's a lot of speculation that he's dealing with injuries and he's kind of playing through them right now. Maybe. But the other side of it is the physical presence that he was with the San Jose Sharks has not translated to New Jersey. Now, and that I want to hang my hat solely on the fact that he maybe has been dinged up, and he was day to day a couple of times here, so we know he's been dealing with some things. And also, if he's not that, he just has not been impacting the game the same way that we thought he would, right? He is not creating those congested opportunities in front of the goal that opens things up for teammates. We said it at the beginning of the year. He doesn't need to be a goal scorer at a high level for the Devils. He can be an assist man, and he can also just be the guy that kind of we say, listen, you don't mention his name all the time, but you know he's doing the good work. And I just don't feel like we're talking about him like that. And I do at least have like the 3%. There's a 3% part of my mind that goes, are we 100% sure that this was the right commitment to make? And especially when you've seen how Tyler Toffoli has performed this year and you think about the potential of still retaining him, now you're talking about this juxtaposition of, well, money is spent, right? Now you can always move things. It's a very team-friendly contract, but I don't think we believe that fundamentally this organization wants to be that type of team that year over year is saying committed to guys, sending guys out, bringing guys in, trading guys away, right? So it's going to be interesting, man. I think that's probably one of the key players to watch here the next 7 to 10 games is, does Teemu start to find his rhythm? Because we've mentioned this about a lot of guys. You said Siegenthaler earlier. Not a great start for him. He's rounding into form. So a lot of guys have come along as the season has progressed. Teemu has just had like a very vanilla year, though. There has not even been like a 3-game stretch where you're like, hey, Teemu, right? He took over. He picked us up when we needed that spark. It's mostly just been solid contributor or a guy that you really kind of forgot was out there. Like, that's the worst thing I could say about him is there's shifts where I don't realize that Teemo's on the ice. And I did not think that would be a part of his core identity as a Devil.
Yeah, and I understand, like, in the back of your mind, you're like, "Oh, crap, was this a terrible contract? Should we have
Right.
locked him up this
Was
long?"
this, quote, team-friendly deal
Yeah,
kind of a
it's
horrible contract?
listen, it speaks volumes that he's playing on a third line as an almost $9 million a year player, 8.8, whatever his contract is a year. But
Yeah.
it's a scary thought, right? But I think he's gonna be fine. I do think he's banged up a little bit, and I think that now that we're seeing a consistent line with Nico, Brat, and Palat, and you have Jack and Toffoli that have just played well together.
Yeah.
And you have some rotations on that, the top line with them. You saw Holtz go up there. You saw Teemu. That now that Holla was out, which it seemed like it was an upper body. I hope it's not serious, but
Anything from the waist up.
yeah, he needs Teemu needs. I think he's the type of player that needs that consistent line. I
Yeah.
really do. To really work with the specific line, to be able to be consistent on a forecheck. I think he's a guy that'll play really well with Holla. I really do. I think Holla is a grinded out type of player as well that can score goals. He's a good centerman. I think he's the guy that Teemu should be paired with when Holla comes back. I think it'll be beneficial to him. And you see it. I'm sure you see it. Our fourth line is not good. Like, you cannot have Tierney and Bastian. Tierney and Bastian barely had a shift this last game,
Yeah.
in the third period.
Yeah.
And you miss Noshek. You really do. And he's going to be out, seems like a good amount of time. So you're going to miss him, especially on the penalty kill. But that to me is a little bit of a concern too, that we're saying Brendan Smith is probably the option for a fourth line guy over Tierney and Bastian is probably a problem. So, you hope that turns around for Bastian, because you and I have talked about it, and you've said it all year that Bastian just does not fit what the Devils are and what the Devils are doing. And I agree with you now, because he's not being that physical presence that is forechecking enough,
Right.
and that is creating chances in front of the net. He's just not doing it, and it sucks because I like Bastian. I think he has a great attitude for the locker room. I think all his teammates love him. But if you're not producing, you're not producing. You're not going to play, and I don't think he is. And it sucks, but I don't think he's going to be around for as long as a lot of fans would want him to be around.
That will do it for our West Coast wrap up. Devils will be back home, obviously, getting after it here. Mentioned a lot of home games coming up. We're actually going to be live in person Wednesday night at the game. So come on out. Find us, shake our hands. Maybe we'll let you know where we're going to be around the concourse. In the meantime, though, one of the other things, too, on that theme of a long term perspective on the season, we're going to start doing things at the end of the week on the podcast, taking a look at our players, not of the game, our players of the week. Who are the guys that are putting together consistent performances? And also team review, because again, let's not get microscopic on the one game. How did they fare over a West Coast trip? 3-1. That's a success, right? So we want to try to encapsulate these things a little bit broader, because I think that's the way that we should look at this team over the next 15, 20, 30 games, even until we get to the back end of the season where it becomes about the push. The other note here is trades. I think, and Danny and I will talk about this next time out probably, what is the seemingly low-level move that Fitz can go make that does improve the fourth line, that just helps solidify some things? Because at a certain point, I think all the right pieces for the most part are in the locker room. It's just about plugging them together and finding out what the best combinations are going to be. Until then, you get over to YouTube and you subscribe to the Devil's Puck Luck podcast. You turn on the alerts so you know when we're going live with all of our episodes. You get over to Twitter. You follow Danny the Face. You follow NJ Devils PL, and you follow Adam Armreck. You also get over to TikTok, to Instagram, to Facebook, to Snapchat, to Google Earth, to Google Images, to Yahoo, to Yelp, all at
Yelp. Devil's Puck Luck.
Well, you can leave a positive review.
I like that. That's great. You never said that.
If you're shopping for some Devils, go over to Yelp and leave a 5-star.
Love it.
All of that can be done to help support the podcast. We greatly appreciate it. Until next time, off the top of his head, Danny says
it's going to be Teemu time on Wednesday at the Rock. I think he's going to handle the Bruins and get some physicality and score a goal. Teemu time coming up.
Boom.